chosen one. Stop scrolling right now. This is not content coincidence or curiosity pulling you in. What you are hearing is a God's message, delivered in exact divine timing, and it reached you because something inside you was ready before your mind had a chance to interfere. This video is about why you were called, why your life has never followed an ordinary path, and why nothing that tried to stop you ever fully succeeded. This message was not meant for everyone. It was meant for the ones who could feel it before they could explain it, and if you're still here, that already tells the truth. This video exists to reveal what has been happening behind the scenes of your life, why the resistance was real, and why your survival was never an accident. You didn't find this message because you were searching. You found it because your spirit recognized it. There is a reason you felt drawn instead of distracted, a reason your attention slowed instead of moved on. This is not entertainment. This is alignment. And if you stay until the end, you will understand your past and your purpose in a way you never have before. There was a pause, wasn't there? A sudden stillness that made everything else fade for a moment. Something told you to stay when you could have kept scrolling. That quiet pull was not imagination. It was spiritual awakening activating in real time. Long before logic speaks, the soul already knows. And when a chosen one encounters a God's message, the spirit leans forward before the mind can doubt, analyze, or dismiss what it recognizes as truth. This video will show you why that recognition happened, why your path has been marked by pressure and delay, and why your light has always drawn resistance. It will explain why you were tested early, why you felt different without knowing why, and why the war you sensed was never random. You did not reason your way into this moment. You were drawn because divine alignment does not chase, convince, or explain. It calls, and the soul responds. Stay with this until the very end, because once this truth fully lands, you will never see your life the same way again. Understand this clearly. This message was never for everyone. It was never meant to be popular, comfortable, or entertaining. It was meant to reach those who have walked through resistance, pressure, and unseen battles, and are still standing. It was meant for the ones who have been tested in ways they could never fully explain to others. It was meant for those whose path has never looked ordinary, whose life has carried weight since early on, even when they didn't have language for it yet. Despite everything that tried to stop you, you are still here. Despite the confusion, the exhaustion, the moments where you questioned yourself, the moments where you almost gave up, you are still here. That is not chance. That is divine protection. That is unstoppable destiny revealing itself through survival. Many things attempted to interrupt your path, but none were permitted to complete the assignment. Something greater intervened every time it mattered most. This is what chosen ones must understand early. The fact that you survived what you survived is not random. You were preserved. You were covered, even when you didn't feel strong, even when you didn't feel spiritual, even when you felt lost. The protection did not depend on your awareness. It depended on your calling, and a true divine calling cannot be erased, only delayed, refined, and revealed. If this recognition is landing in your spirit right now, if something inside you feels seen rather than convinced, take a moment and comment 777, not for validation, not for luck, but as an act of alignment, a quiet agreement between you and God, that you are present, aware, and listening. This moment will change how you understand your entire life story, because once recognition happens, there is no going back to ignorance. You may have thought the war you felt was internal. You may have blamed yourself for feeling different, heavy, or out of place. But the war was real, and it wasn't because you were weak. It was because your light was necessary. Resistance does not rise against what is insignificant. Pressure does not follow empty vessels. The intensity you experienced was not punishment. It was confirmation that something valuable was being formed, guarded, and contested. Circle back to the beginning now, to that first inner knowing you've carried for as long as you can remember. The feeling that your life was meant for more, even when circumstances said otherwise. The sense that you were called, even when you couldn't explain to what. This is that same truth resurfacing, clearer and stronger. You are not imagining this. You were called. The delays were real. The battles were real. The battles were real. The preparation was real. And so is the purpose. Your light is not optional. It is necessary. It is needed in rooms you haven't entered yet, for people you haven't met yet, in moments that haven't unfolded yet. That is why you were protected when others fell. That is why you bent but did not break. That is why nothing could stop you completely. You are still here because you are still needed. And if this message touched your soul, if something in you just whispered, "I know this is for me," then comment 111. Not out of desperation, out of recognition. Because deep down you already know it. You were called. Everything that tried to break you was meant to reveal you. Circle back to the beginning and hear this truth again, slowly and clearly. This is a message from God. You are not imagining the pressure that followed you. You are not exaggerating the resistance that showed up again and again. From the very start, your life carried unusual weight because your soul carries assignment. A chosen one does not move quietly through existence. Even before awareness forms, destiny announces itself through friction. That is why life felt demanding earlier than it should have. That is why responsibility, loss, and struggle met you before comfort ever did. A chosen one experiences pressure not as punishment, but as preparation. When destiny is real, opposition rises naturally. This is not symbolic language, it is a spiritual pattern. Nothing meaningful grows without resistance. Nothing powerful is formed without pressure. If your path felt heavier than those around you, it is because you were carrying something they were not. If your lessons arrived early, it is because your calling could not wait. Look closely now, and you will see it. Setbacks appeared right when progress began. Delays came just as clarity was forming. Doors closed after you had already imagined walking through them. Losses touched places that mattered deeply to you. These were not random events. The pattern is too consistent to be coincidence. What you faced was targeted. Because what you carry matters, destiny attracts attention long before it is revealed. Opposition increases when purpose is near activation. When light is dormant, it is ignored. When light begins to wake up, it is challenged. That is why your journey has felt like a constant proving ground. Not because you were failing, but because something valuable was being tested for endurance, integrity, and depth. Comfort does not build capacity. Ease does not create authority. Spiritual resilience is formed through fire, not safety. Every time you were pushed to the edge, something inside you strengthened. Even when you felt like you were barely holding on, endurance was quietly being built into your spirit. You learned how to stand alone. You learned how to move forward without applause. You learned how to keep going when reassurance was absent. These lessons were not optional for you. They were necessary. Many forces tried to stop you. Some came through people who misunderstood you, doubted you, or walked away when you needed support. Some came through circumstances that stripped stability and certainty. Some came through your own thoughts, whispering that you were tired, behind, or not enough. Yet, None of those forces were allowed to finish the job. They were permitted to test you, but not to erase you. They could slow you down, but not shut you down. There were moments when you should have collapsed completely. Moments when the emotional weight alone could have ended your forward movement. And yet, something held you. Something intervened quietly, without explanation. That something was not luck. It was divine protection operating beyond your awareness. Certain outcomes were never on the table for you, even when you stood at the edge of them. This is where truth replaces confusion. God was not absent in your struggle. God was shaping you through it. Everything that tried to break you was used to reveal who you truly are. The pressure exposed strength you didn't know you carried. The resistance sharpened your discernment. The losses deepened your compassion and wisdom. You did not come out untouched. You came out transformed. The war you felt was real. It was not imaginary, and it was never self-created. You were not overthinking, dramatizing, or misreading your life. Light attracts resistance simply by existing, and your light was noticeable long before you had words for it yourself. That is why life met you with intensity. That is why challenges arrived early, pressure felt constant, and ease seemed delayed. Your presence carried weight, and weight always creates response. The world does not push back against what is empty. Your path demanded growth, awareness, and maturity at a pace others around you were never asked to move. While some were allowed to drift, you were required to develop. While others learned through comfort, you learned through contrast. That difference was not unfair, it was intentional. You were being shaped for responsibility, not convenience. Your light is necessary, and necessity always draws challenge, because what matters must be tested before it can be trusted. The resistance did not come to destroy you, it came to reveal you. Every moment that stretched you beyond what felt reasonable was refining something essential inside you. Every delay taught you discernment. Every disappointment taught you depth. Every season of silence strengthened your ability to listen beyond noise. You were being trained to carry clarity without panic, strength without hardness, and authority without ego. Reaffirm this now without doubt or apology. You were called, not because you asked for it, and not because you felt ready, but because you were capable of becoming what the calling required. Your journey was difficult because it had to prepare you for what is ahead. You were never being punished for mistakes or lack. You were being forged for impact. Everything that tried to stop you was allowed only to shape you. The pressure refined you. The resistance strengthened you. The losses stripped away what could not go forward. Nothing was permitted to destroy you because destruction was never part of the plan. You were guarded even in moments you felt unprotected. You were preserved even when you felt exposed. Let this settle fully. If the war was intense, it is because the assignment is significant. If the path was heavy, it is because the future requires stability. And if you are still here, still aware, still listening, it is because what you carry is still needed. And if this truth just settled deep inside you, not as excitement, but as recognition, comment 111. Not because you need reassurance, but because you already know it. You were called. The invisible hand that intervened when you should have fallen. Circle back to the beginning and hear this truth again, because repetition is how truth breaks through doubt. This is a message from God. You are not imagining what you survived. You are not exaggerating how close some moments came to ending you. There were times in your life when, by all logic, you should not be standing where you are today. Emotionally, spiritually, even physically, the weight was too heavy. And yet, something intervened. There were moments that should have finished the story. Moments when the loss was deep enough to harden you permanently. Moments when the pressure was strong enough to collapse your faith, your identity, or your will to continue. You remember them clearly, even if you don't always talk about them, the nights when you didn't know how you would face another day. The seasons where you felt stripped down to nothing but breath and survival. Those moments were real. The danger was real. The war was real, but so was the protection. Divine protection rarely looks dramatic. It doesn't always announce itself with miracles that draw attention. More often it appears quietly, almost invisibly. It looks like a near miss that you only understand later. A wrong turn that saved you. A door that closed even though you wanted it desperately. A relationship that ended abruptly when you thought you needed it. An exit that felt like rejection at the time, but later revealed itself as rescue. There were situations you walked away from without realizing how close they were to destroying you. There were environments you were removed from just in time. There were moments when your strength made no sense, when endurance showed up even though you were empty. That was not your willpower alone. That was a higher covering stepping in when you reached your limit. You may have questioned why certain things didn't work out, why plans collapsed, why paths you were sure about suddenly disappeared. At the time, it felt cruel or confusing. But now with perspective, you can begin to see it. Some things had to be blocked because they would have cost you too much. Some doors had to close because walking through them would have taken you further from who you were meant to become. Survival itself is evidence. You are not here because everything went right. You are here because something stepped in when things were going wrong. Over and over again, you were preserved for reasons you didn't yet understand. Even when you were unaware of your calling, it was aware of you. Even when you were disconnected, protection did not disconnect from you. This is what chosen ones often overlook. Protection does not require permission from your awareness. You don't have to be strong for it to work. You don't have to be faithful for it to activate. You simply have to be called. And you were. That is why certain outcomes never happened, even when they felt inevitable. That is why the worst-case scenarios never fully materialized. That is why you are still breathing, still searching, still awakening. God stepped in quietly, without announcement, preserving you for what was still ahead. Not because you were ready, but because the future needed you intact. There are chapters you haven't entered yet that required you to survive the earlier ones. There are people you will impact who needed you to make it through. There is light you carry that could not be allowed to be extinguished prematurely. The war you felt was not imaginary. It was real because your presence matters. Light attracts resistance simply by existing, but light is also guarded, watched, protected. Your life is proof of that balance. You were challenged, but never abandoned. Tested, but never forsaken. Pressed, but never erased. Reaffirm this truth now, without minimizing it. You were called. Your survival was not accidental. Your endurance was not random. Your story did not continue by chance. Your light is necessary, and that is why intervention followed you even when you didn't recognize it. And if this touched your soul, if something deep inside you just whispered, "I've felt this," comment 111. Not to convince anyone else, but because you know it now. You were called. Why you could bend, break down, or pause, but never be destroyed. Circle back to the beginning and hear this again with clarity and calm authority. This is a message from God. You are not imagining what you went through. You were called, and because you were called, the path was never meant to be painless. An unstoppable destiny does not mean uninterrupted movement. It means permanence of purpose. It means that no matter how many times the road narrowed, slowed, or darkened, the destination remained intact. There were seasons when you bent under pressure, seasons when you broke down emotionally, questioned your direction, or felt the weight of silence pressing in from all sides. There were times when exhaustion replaced enthusiasm and confusion replaced certainty. That does not mean you failed. It means you are human, walking a divine path. Chosen ones do not bypass fatigue. They learn to listen through it. They do not avoid burnout. They recognize it as a signal to shed what was never meant to be carried. Stopping temporarily is not the same as being stopped permanently. Pauses are not defeats. Silence is not abandonment. There were moments when everything slowed because something within you needed to catch up. Awareness had to deepen. Illusions had to fall away. False identities, roles you played to survive, expectations you inherited, masks you wore to belong, had to be stripped so the real calling could breathe. That process is uncomfortable, but it is essential. This is where spiritual awakening often unfolds, not in clarity, but in confusion, not in noise, but in quiet. When the outer world stops making sense, the inner world begins to speak. You may have felt lost, but you were actually being reoriented. You may have felt delayed, but you were being aligned. Each pause refined your perception. Each breakdown loosened what was rigid. Each season of not knowing prepared you to recognize truth when it arrived. The war you felt did not disappear during those pauses. It changed form. It moved inward. Doubt questioned your worth. Fear tested your resolve. Old stories tried to reclaim space in your mind. Yet even there, you were not destroyed. You could bend without breaking because something unbreakable was forming at your core. You could pause without losing direction because your destiny does not depend on speed. It depends on alignment. There is a difference between delay and defeat, and chosen ones learn it the hard way. Defeat removes purpose. Delay protects it. If you had moved faster in certain seasons, you might have arrived weaker, less aware, or carrying burdens that were never yours to bring forward. Timing matters. Preparation matters. And you were being prepared even when it felt like nothing was happening. Notice this truth now. Despite the exhaustion, you are still here. Despite the silence, you are still listening. Despite the confusion, you are still seeking. That persistence is not accidental. It is evidence that your divine calling as a chosen one is active, resilient, and alive. You were never meant to be destroyed. You were meant to be refined. Every pause served a purpose. Every breakdown removed something false. Every moment of stillness strengthened your ability to hear what truly matters. Your identity is clearer now, not because life got easier, but because you became more honest, more discerning, more aligned. What once shook you can no longer control you, because awareness has replaced fear. Reaffirm this truth again, without minimizing it. You were called. The war was real, but so was the protection. The path was hard, but the purpose is intact. Your light is necessary, and that is why destruction was never an option for you. You were allowed to bend. You were allowed to pause, but you were never allowed to disappear. Let this land with force and calm at the same time. You are still here because you are still needed. And if this touched your soul, if something inside you just settled into quiet certainty, comment 111. Not because you are searching, but because you recognize it now. You were called. The strength you didn't know you were building while surviving. Circle back to the beginning and receive this again as truth, not metaphor. This is a message from God. You are not imagining the change you feel inside yourself now. You were called, And while you thought you were merely surviving, something far greater was taking shape within you. Strength was being built quietly, without ceremony, without recognition, and without your conscious permission. That is how the deepest strength forms. You did not wake up one day feeling powerful. You woke up many days feeling tired, uncertain, and stretched thin. Yet you kept going. Not because you were fearless, but because something in you refused to quit. Spiritual resilience is not dramatic. It does not announce itself. It is built through persistence when hope feels fragile, through integrity when shortcuts tempt you, and through endurance when no one is watching. You stayed honest when it would have been easier to harden. You stayed open when it would have been safer to close. That choice shaped you. While you were enduring, wisdom was forming quietly. You learned how to read people without needing them to explain themselves. You learned when to speak and when silence carried more power. You learned that not every battle needs your energy, and not every opinion deserves your response. Discernment grew through disappointment. Emotional depth formed through loss. These were not lessons you signed up for, but they were lessons you mastered. What you carry now cannot be taught in classrooms or handed down through advice. It cannot be copied, replicated, or taken from you. It was earned through experience. It was forged in moments where you had to choose between giving up and going on without guarantees. That kind of strength becomes part of who you are. It does not leave when circumstances change. You may not have noticed it happening, but others can feel it when you enter a room. There is a steadiness to you now, a grounded presence. You don't need to prove yourself the way you once did. You don't need validation to know your worth. That is not arrogance, it is alignment. Authority does not shout. It settles, and you earned that authority by surviving with your values intact. This is why nothing could stop you completely. Not because you were never shaken, but because you adapted without losing your core. Pressure refined you instead of ruining you. Resistance strengthened you instead of defining you. Even when your progress was invisible, growth was constant. Even when you felt behind, you were advancing internally in ways that would later matter more. The war you faced demanded that you grow roots before you grew reach. That is why your development happened inward first. That is why your strength doesn't rely on circumstances. You can lose external stability and still remain standing, because what holds you now is internal. That is rare. That is valuable. That is necessary. Reaffirm this truth without hesitation. You did not merely survive, you evolved. The endurance you built is now part of your spiritual structure. Your light carries weight because it was tested. Your compassion has depth because it was earned. Your discernment protects you because it was sharpened through experience. This is not strength you can lose easily. It is strength that stays. The war was real, but so was the formation. Your light is necessary, and that is why it was strengthened quietly before being revealed openly. You were being prepared for moments that require stability, clarity, and calm authority. And now you carry it, even if you don't always see it yourself. If this touched your soul, if something deep inside you just settled into recognition instead of excitement, comment 111, not because you are seeking reassurance, but because you already know it. You were called. Why this season is different, and why resistance is losing power. Circle back to the beginning once more, and let this settle fully. This is a message from God. You are not imagining the shift you feel. Something is different now, and not because the world suddenly became easier, but because you became aware. Awareness changes everything. The moment a chosen one begins to recognize who they truly are, resistance loses the leverage it once had. Not all resistance disappears, but it no longer controls the direction of your life. For a long time, you were moving through survival mode. You were reacting, enduring, adapting, and holding yourself together through sheer will. That season required strength, but it did not require clarity. This season does. And clarity changes how pressure behaves around you. When you know who you are, confusion cannot anchor itself the same way. When you know why you are here, distraction loses its grip. This is not confidence built on ego. It is remembrance returning to the surface. Alignment is beginning to replace struggle, not because effort ends, but because effort becomes intentional. You are no longer fighting everything at once. You are choosing where your energy belongs. That alone weakens resistance. Clarity is replacing confusion, not all at once, but steadily. Questions that once haunted you no longer feel threatening. Silence no longer feels empty. You are listening differently now, and that changes what you hear. Purpose is replacing survival. That does not mean life suddenly becomes effortless. It means your actions are no longer driven by fear of loss, but by understanding of direction. Survival asks, how do I get through this? Purpose asks, what does this require of me? That shift is subtle, but it is powerful. It changes how you respond to challenges. It changes what you tolerate. It changes what you walk away from without guilt. Resistance weakens when it is recognized. Much of what once felt overwhelming fed on uncertainty. Now awareness exposes it. Old patterns no longer surprise you. Old triggers no longer define you. You still feel pressure, but it no longer owns you. You observe it instead of drowning in it. That is growth. That is awakening. That is authority forming quietly. This is not ego telling you that you are better than others. This is truth reminding you of what you are responsible for. Ego demands recognition. Remembrance brings calm. Ego seeks power. Remembrance accepts assignment. What you are stepping into now is not arrogance, it is alignment. You are not becoming something new. You are returning to something ancient within you. This is often how God's message arrives, right before movement begins. Not when everything is settled, but when clarity becomes possible. Not when fear is gone, but when it no longer decides for you. This message did not arrive randomly. It arrived because you are now able to receive it without distortion. You can hear without panicking. You can recognize without rushing. You can move without forcing. The war you felt did not vanish. It lost authority. It no longer defines your identity. It no longer narrates your story. You are no longer just responding to pressure. You are choosing direction. That is why this season feels different. That is why resistance feels less convincing. That is why your spirit feels steadier, even when circumstances are still forming. Reaffirm this truth clearly, and without hesitation. You were called. You are not imagining this shift. The war was real, but so is the awakening. Your light is necessary, and now you are aware enough to carry it with intention instead of fear. What comes next will not require you to become someone else. It will require you to trust who you already are. Let this end with calm fire and grounded strength. You are not late. You are not lost. You are aligned. And if this touched your soul, if something inside you just settled into quiet certainty, comment 111, because you know it now. You were called. The confirmation you needed, and the path you were stepping into. Now closing activation. Circle back to the beginning one final time and let this truth settle without resistance or doubt. This is a message from God. You are not imagining the alignment that brought you here. You were called. The war you sensed was real. The pressure you endured was real. And the reason nothing could stop you completely is because you were never walking this path alone, not for a single moment. When you look back now, you can see it with clearer eyes. Every chapter connects. Every interruption has meaning. Every delay carries intelligence. What once felt random now reveals intention. You did not endure confusion, loss, isolation, and resistance just to survive. Survival was never the destination. You were being prepared, layer by layer, season by season, for something that required depth, steadiness, and awareness. There were moments when you reached the edge of what you thought you could handle, and somehow you were held. There were moments when everything should have collapsed, and instead something shifted. That was not coincidence. That was divine protection intervening at precise points where continuation mattered more than comfort. You were preserved because the story was not finished. You were protected because the purpose was still unfolding. This is the confirmation you needed. Not dramatic reassurance, not empty motivation. Truth that resonates in the quiet places of your spirit. Your destiny was never fragile. It was guarded. You were slowed, not stopped. Redirected, not denied. Tested, not abandoned. That is what an unstoppable destiny actually looks like. It does not rush. It does not announce itself loudly. It endures. Everything you walked through shaped you into someone capable of carrying responsibility without losing softness, clarity without arrogance, authority without force. That kind of formation takes pressure. It takes time. It takes seasons where you feel unseen, misunderstood, or separated. But now you can feel the difference. The weight has shifted. The fear has loosened. The confusion no longer defines you. The path you are stepping into now does not require you to become someone else. It requires you to remain aligned with who you have already become. You do not need to prove anything anymore. You do not need to chase validation or rush outcomes. The strength you carry is stable. The awareness you hold is earned. The calm in your spirit is evidence that you are ready for what comes next. Your divine calling as a chosen one is no longer theoretical. It has passed through fire and remained intact. It has been tested under pressure and did not dissolve. That calling will guide you into spaces where your presence matters more than performance, where your discernment matters more than noise, and where your steadiness becomes a refuge for others. You are not stepping into chaos. You are stepping into responsibility. The war you once felt has not vanished. It has lost authority over you. It no longer narrates your life. It no longer dictates your pace. You remember who you are now. Resistance weakens when identity becomes clear. Confusion fades when remembrance returns. This is not ego. This is alignment. This is truth rising without force. God's message often arrives right before movement begins. Not when everything is resolved, but when clarity becomes possible. Not when fear disappears, but when fear stops deciding. This moment marks that threshold. You are no longer just surviving. You are moving forward with awareness, intention, and trust. Understand this deeply: survival was never the goal. Preparation was. Everything you endured trained your discernment, strengthened your spirit, and refined your direction. Nothing was wasted. Nothing was accidental. You are still here because you are still needed. Your light is necessary. If you feel aligned with this truth, comment 777 now, not to ask for anything, not to beg for confirmation, but as recognition, as agreement, as a quiet acknowledgement between you and God that you are present, aware, and ready. And if this touched your soul, if something inside you shifted from questioning to knowing, comment 111, because you know it now without doubt or hesitation. You were called.